You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
As we record this, Gavin, we are less than 3 hours from arguably the most important Canadian soccer game played in the last 20 years. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do that, because we are less than 3 hours away from the most important Canadian soccer game played in arguably 20, 25 years, maybe ever, I'm going to talk about a 17-year-old that scored a hat-trick for Liverpool yesterday.
Exactly.
For Liverpool's under 18s yesterday. 16-year-old, pardon me.
A Canadian.
Yeah, Liam Millar. This is probably news to a lot of people listening. Yesterday in the U18, Blackburn beat Liverpool U18 game. Let's keep everything in check here. It's a U18 game, Canadian fans. Voyageurs, cap him now. I'm just saying that we need to keep it in check. Cap him now because he's been in England since he was 13 or 12. So cap him now. We just need to keep everything in line because I'm not dreaming of a Millar, Laren, and that's not something that I'm dreaming of winning the World Cup. Yes, I said winning. All right. No, that's. Quickly again, this is a player that used to be in Fulham. I actually got a message a few months ago, Kevin, from someone who was suggesting that this would happen, and we should keep an eye on this kid. He's been over in England since he was 12 or 13. He played for Fulham in their youth system, was obviously a standout there. He wanted to move to a bigger club, so he's done that with Liverpool. And
so when is he going to move to that bigger club? Sorry.
I'm not going to touch that one with 10-foot pole. At any rate, the studio audience here does not appreciate that. Those that know the studio audience will appreciate that. At any rate, this kid, as I said, he made his debut for their youth setup yesterday, and there's an article about him in the Liverpool Echo today. So, no pressure, kid. You're going to have a very passionate fan base that's already knows your name, and a very desperate fan base here in Canada that's desperate to know more about your name, I'm sure. It says that he's kind of a smaller guy. He's a back for goal. So that's something that Canadians have struggled with for all time. So even it's an under 18 game, keep it in check. But I thought we'd throw it out there to start the game, Kevin. Start the day, Kevin.
Exactly. And we had a busy weekend of soccer, Duane, as we were talking as well. 8 minutes ago, the first semifinal of the day started, Brazil-Sweden. It's still 0-0. And, the Olympic tournament is getting interesting now. Brazil side on both sides are getting good at the right time, especially on the men's side. They decided to, okay, now it's time, we need to score. But outside of that, I'm just, 3 p.m. today, I can't. I just can't.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this game that it almost feels like repeating it on this show, but this is Soccer Today. So quickly, in the time that we have, let's talk a little bit about it. We've already sort of given our thoughts on how we think the game is going to go today on Five Rings. So if you listen to that, apologies for it. But just quickly, Kevin, could you summarize what you said on that show and how you think the game's going to? If you changed your mind in the last 20 minutes, go ahead.
I didn't. For me, this game is going to be the same result, but not the same way that the game in the group stage happened between Canada and Germany. I do have a feeling Germany will take the lead in that game. Canada will do what Canada knows how to do best, and that's being gritty, work hard, and that work rate, and we'll get the equalizer, and we'll get a shocker in around the 110th minute. Yes, I predict extra time, and it will be quite interesting to see how Canada push and reacts defensively and gets an opportunity probably on the counter late in that game. That's how I see this game unfold. I might be wrong, but they impressed me so much that I do have to change the way I look at this team right now, because they have evolved, in my opinion, in the last 4 games, and it'll be interesting to see how they play today.
Yeah, and look, and I played the role of the wet blanket, which shouldn't surprise anyone who's listened to me for years talk about this team. And look, I fully admit that I sometimes get overly critical, too critical almost of that team. But and I've also would like to point out that I have been on the front foot of saying that they've been incredibly impressive. They've impressed me more than they ever have in the last week and a half. So I do give them a chance to win today, and that would be incredible. I talked about it. If you listened to yesterday's show, and if you haven't, you should go back and listen to it before the game today, because Daniel Squizzato gave us a lot of great insight in the lead up to the game in our preview of it yesterday, our full preview of it yesterday. The beating Germany twice in a week in the lead up. If you'd asked us this a month ago, do you think you could beat Germany twice, a team that they had never so much as drawn before the Olympics in a 2-week period? We would have went like, can I have some of what you're having? That would have been exactly what we would have said. So
your supplier is good.
Yeah, man, is it 420? Whoa, yeah, it would have been something new, Dreamland stuff, right?
Exactly,
So,
but now it's doesn't seem that far-fetched.
well, it seems a little far-fetched to me still, but that's just my cynical nature because I've been following the Canadian national program since 1985. Nonetheless, is this the most important game that I look? I think the next one would clearly be the most important game they've ever played. Is a semifinal of the Olympics, because they played one 4 years ago.
Yeah, against the United States. Yeah, that had more writing on it, I believe, because it was a surprise, but the attention, because it was the state, direct rival. I think in our neck of the woods, we might have a more, we're surprised by it. So it had that special feeling. This time it's like a build up to it. So I don't know, maybe it's equal to the one in 2012.
Yeah, look, I mean, I would say speaking from outside the bubble, if I could sort of try and think about from outside the bubble for a second, I don't think people would view it as quite the same, because they outside the bubble wouldn't have been as surprised by it as you suggested. They would have seen this as a culmination of like continuation of what they'd done previously. They wouldn't have necessarily been as blown away by the performances, because they would have went in kind of blind, going, oh, well, they did well last Olympics, so obviously they do well this one. So this would just be like they would think, okay, well, let's take the next step. Inside the bubble, however, I look at this and go, they've never had a better chance to do something spectacular. Winning the bronze is pretty damn good, but they win this game, they have a good chance to win gold, and that's outrageous. Like that's crazy Dreamland stuff. That's like 420 on drugs itself. That's insane.
You never know what can happen, Duane. The way this tournament is going, Sweden might beat Brazil today, and you face a team that's ranked below you in the standings or very close to you in the final for the gold medal that you have a chance to beat.
Yeah, look.
But today first,
indeed. And if you want to look ahead, I think you look at it and go, they have actually handled Brazil in the past. They've lost to Brazil plenty of times too, but of the best teams in the world, the team that they consistently do the best against is Brazil. They've beaten Brazil in Brazil before, in the Pan Ams a few years ago. That was one of the famous victory that they had that sort of propelled them back after the Marache disaster, is that a few months after the end of the blast of the Marache period, when all went wrong, and after that last World Cup there, they went a few months after that to the Pan Am Games and won them. So that was actually Mexico, not in Brazil. Brazil's Pan Ams before that. At any rate, nonetheless, they still beat them, and that was a big moment for the program, a program that sort of helped them propel them into the Herdman years. So there's history against Brazil, and against Sweden. Again, this is a program that they have some history with, because it's the top 10 team, and all the top 10 teams have history against each other. They played Sweden in probably what would have been their most important game prior to this Olympic spell, in the World Cup in 2003 in the semifinals. So there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of success there against those teams. So I would say that there's a good chance at bronze, is what I'm trying to say. And that's all that I think I'm focusing on right now, is that they really are in with a great chance at a medal right now. And the gold, let's wait until it's in front of us before we worry about that.
Yep. Yeah, that's very true. Very true. And the other side again, we mentioned Brazil, Sweden. It's 0-0 in the first half right now as we are recording soccer today, and now we are live. It's 12:15. So, Duane, whoever wins, Brazil, Sweden, or Germany, or Canada, it's refreshing to see a tournament with a couple of new teams that we're not expecting at this level of the tournament.
Yeah. let's turn our attention on some Major League Soccer stuff.
Yes, fine.
Sorry, I'm breaking up a little bit here, Kevin, in terms of the sound, so I apologize.
Everything is fine.
Yeah. All right. There was a story today I wanted to give some attention to, and it involved Landon Donovan. And Landon Donovan made a statement yesterday in an article, which sort of implied very heavily that he was looking into going into coaching. And I wondered what we thought about that, because this is just sort of an easy topic to talk about today for one reason. But it's also interesting that a guy that Donovan's stature within Major League Soccer, they named the MVP trophy after him, even though he never won it. Anyway, they named the MVP trophy after him. He is the most well-known American national team player, I think, of all time. This is a legend of the game. To come in and coach within Major League Soccer's context, is this a good idea? Is this something that you would want to see happen?
Well, it's for him, right? He needs to approach it for the right reason. Of course, we haven't had this situation come up in Major League Soccer yet. The league is 20 years old now. There hasn't been, like, their best player is making the transition now, maybe to coach, but there's not an example of this happening before or in other sphere in the world of soccer. We have Mauro Biello in Montreal, which is considered a legend for the club, but wasn't the best scorer close to it of the entire club or the history of the club. It was a very important figure for the club because of his loyalty, because of his time with the club, and the fact that he was captain of the club for so long and a mainstay in the midfield and the defense. So those were the reason for Mauro Biello's legend status with Montreal, and he's been coaching, and we've seen a positive aspect to it. Landon Donovan is a bit different because when he takes the mantle, it's more equivalent to Zinedine Zidane taking over Real Madrid than Biello taking over Montreal, even though this example is in Major League Soccer, because the gravitas, the glory, the aura, the glory that Landon Donovan will take, it might be beneficial, but your superstars in the locker room, do they want the coach to be the star of the team? That's kind of the question that I'm asking. Yeah.
Most of the successful in all sports across the board, you often see successful coaches that come in as guys that were third, fourth liners in hockey, to use a hockey terminology. There's your bingo for the day.
Or even like
were kind of
championship guys, championship journeyman, they become a Premier League coach that are really good.
Yeah, although that said, you mentioned Zidane, you see Mancini was a brilliant player in his day.
Yeah, but look at Zidane. He was put in a situation that it's a lot easier to begin your career like this than you become your career with Aberdeen. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like easier to take over a team that's the richest in the world and has the best lineup in the world. And okay, you coach them. There's a certain divide there.
Yeah, the one example I'll give Mark Hughes, Sparky. He was a star for Manchester United back in the day, and has gone in and kind of coached at lower level. When he was coaching City, that was before the money. So he's gone to a lot of clubs that are kind of plumber clubs since, and has been successful at finding his zone there. That's an example of a superstar that's managed to coach lesser talents to some degree of success. But generally speaking, I think that there is an element of needing to sort of understand and respect the guys that you need to coach up. And I think superstars sometimes fail to deal with that. They can't understand that. They're not used to it themselves. We'll just do that, right? Like, that's kind of their mentality. Like, why aren't you just doing this?
It's so easy. Why aren't you doing it? I used to do it. Why can't you?
Yeah, the answer is they're not capable of it, and they don't know. Superstars often don't know how to teach them to do that. And I think that that's a real skill. And what I'd say about Donovan, to get back more on focus here, is that if he's really interested in coaching, I think that it's really vital that he do the work needed to become a coach and not just parachute in and take over from Bruce Arena, which is maybe what he's hinting for here, right? Like, Bruce Arena retires in the next couple of years, and Bruce probably will retire eventually, although I can't imagine that man.
That's a shot across the bow if LAFC gets him as their first head coach. That's literally a shot across the bow to the other side of LA.
Yeah, Landon could play still if he really wanted to put his dedication to. But at any rate, no, I think that's a bad idea. And I look at Patrick Vieira. Let's talk about Patrick Vieira for a second. A lot of people are like, parachute. But no, Patrick Vieira did like 3 years teaching kids at the City Academy, right? Like, that's, say what you want about City and their money and parachuting them in after the fact. But the reality is that from a Vieira-only perspective, he didn't start at the top. He purposely went down. He's done interviews where he said that when he retired and City Football Group said, we want to keep you around. How can we do that? He sort of went to them and said, I want to try everything. And he went into the ticketing office, the marketing office. He did all sorts of different jobs within City Football Group. And part of that was he dipped his toe into coaching, found that, yeah, I do really like this. And this is something that meets my skill. And so he started with their kids and worked as well to the elite development squad. And then eventually now they've moved him to what they would consider a natural progression up. I think that probably insults some MLS fans to think that they would think, U20 team to MLS is a progression, is the not the as big a step as they think it is in their mind. But at any rate, nonetheless, he's progressing. So that's what I'd say to Landon. If this is what he wants, he should progress. He should go get his badges. He should coach an academy team for a while and try and find his way to the top rather than parachute into the top, because I think then it's going to all be about him. MLS is still about the personalities, right? And that's going to rub some of these grunts that are trying to just get on with it and make their $70,000 a year and be a contributing factor to a football club, to an MLS team. They're going to maybe regret, maybe be not completely happy with that and not find that ideal, because they might respect a coach that's gone through the progression a little bit more than they would a Donovan. And I don't know if Donovan's skill sets that he brought to the game when he was a player are teachable either. It was about speed and instinct, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And yeah, some finishing skills and all that. But yeah, it's not skills that are easily translatable to being coachable. Yeah.
All right. Enough of that. Tell us what you think. If you think Landon Donovan would be a good coach or not, I'm not entirely sure. I think that he has probably the potential as any former coach, any former player does. But as I said, to stress it one more time, I think he needs to go through the progressions. He needs to get his badges. He needs to do the things that he should do. We saw Ryan Nelson here in Toronto, where they parachuted him in from the Premier League, and it didn't completely work out. Maybe he didn't get a full enough chance. That's an argument that's made here in this city. But nonetheless, he certainly didn't come in and win a coach of the year either, right?
Yeah, exactly. It could happen. It depends of the team too. If the team stays the same, you just change the coach and he keeps everything the same. We've seen worse. We've seen crazier things happen.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do a Canadian review.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The Canadian review on the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast.
The sweet, soothing sounds of the Bare Naked Ladies always tell us that it's time to talk about Montreal losing.
Or Vancouver, or Toronto not taking advantage of a 10-man too. And I have to say a little anecdote for the Toronto and Houston game. Duane, you could tell it's the Olympics and a lot of producers and technical assistants are working on the Olympics, because let's just say the production values were missing a lot of things during the game. I don't know if you noticed. It took them 25 minutes before they put the red card icon. A lot of replays were missing. You didn't have the same type of shots, same type of camera work than normal. Yeah, you can tell that the Olympics are going on.
Yeah, well, it also didn't help. Of course, the talking point with that game is the fact that it happened 24 hours after it was scheduled to happen. Massive rainstorms in Houston, as anyone who follows weather at all knows. There's been flooding down there. There's been a whole work. So this is no laughing matter. This is a serious storm that hit the region. It just so happened to also cause a delay in Toronto FC and Houston's game. Going into that game, I think that anyone who knows MLS knows that when you go on the road, it's a big challenge. There's a lot of factors at play. You have to fly commercial. You have to, make your connections. And I don't know how many direct flights there are from Toronto to Houston. To be honest with you, I think they'd probably have to fly through Dallas. And that's, all that stuff plays a role. And then you have to stay a whole extra game. And I think the TFC fans, God love you, are a little bit hypercritical when they're getting upset over only getting a point on the road. Yes, they were up a man, but I don't know when is it? This isn't a damn video game, right? Like, you watch other games out there? Like that's not automatic to beat a team with 10. In fact, when a team goes down to 10, they sometimes especially at home, sometimes gives them the resolve to defend harder.
I was gonna mention it gives them that resolve, that intangible, that famous X factor, that little extra gear. All the cliches you want to mention, but it does happen.
Yeah, exactly. And look, yes, you'd like to get results, but my God, people, this is my biggest complaint. And it is a complaint. I'm lecturing. I appreciate this, but is that TFC fans 10 years in, some of them, not all of them, but some of them still have this expectation that the team is going to act like a Premier League team. That it's going to, like, just because they have a lot of money, just because they have some good players in the team, that they're going to parachute into these situations in the same way that a Real Madrid would, or that a Manchester United would, or whoever, and just dominate these teams on the road. That doesn't happen in this league, period. It just doesn't across the board. This isn't a Toronto thing. This is an MLS thing. So the fact that they got a point, with all of the circumstances around that, Kevin, to me, and I wasn't actually on Twitter while I was watching it. I was just watching it blind, and I didn't know that there was all this anger around this game at the time. And when I finally got on and looked, I was like, what the hell, people? Like, seriously, what would make you happy? These are people that, if TFC were to win the MLS Cup, would be complaining they didn't get enough corner kicks. That's kind of what I thought about that game. I mean, it was a point in the damn road when they had to wait an extra day.
And nobody got injured, and it was 50 degrees, and nobody got injured. Well, actually, no, somebody got injured. Who got injured?
I don't recall an injury, but at any rate.
Well, yeah, but it was like 50 degrees Celsius. It was crazy temperature, too, the next day.
Yeah, no, it's been crazy. It's been hot up here, too. It's finally cooled down today, thankfully. But at any rate, no, it's you take what you can get. It was a nice goal by Josie, too. There's lots of positives from that. They got a point in the road. Yes, they went down to 10 men, but they forced it down to 10 men. Josie gets another goal that helps to lead that to it. They stayed relatively injury-free, as you suggested. So lots to like about a 1-1 draw on the road against Houston, a place that they haven't done particularly well at over the years either. And you move on, and you go to the next road game because they have 3 in a row, and then it's a big home stretch down the road. And anyone who's trying to yell at me that the home games don't matter, were you paying any attention to the previous 4?
Yep, exactly. So that's interesting. Let's go to Montreal, Duane. 3-1 defeat in New York. Speaking of places that were hot, it was about 45 degrees Celsius in Harrison, New Jersey at the Red Bull Arena for the Montreal Impact versus New York Red Bull game. A lot of standings implication in that game, and Montreal took advantage of their chances earlier on. Manco Sutupiati, 1-0 Montreal, but eventually the tide turned. Bradley Wright Phillips scored twice. Sean Davis for the third goal. There was an Oyongo red card that was questionable, and the one storyline outside of this game is the refereeing. Drogba, Piatti, the coaching staff, everybody talked about, the journalists as well, talked about the refereeing in this game because of the fact that the game before, the game in Red Bull Arena between Galaxy and Red Bulls, the Red Bulls were kind of hardly done by referee call. And it was like admitted that after the fact that, yeah, we apologize. And it seemed like it's the other side of that coin that happened in this game between Montreal and New York. So it's kind of not necessarily better to go on the other side when you feel like you hardly done a team like the game before. And you cannot necessarily hardly done the other team to influence result. And it's probably not that. It's probably subconscious but it just, in optics, that's what it looks like.
Yeah. Red Bulls are a good team too.
True. No, granted, and they had a man up as well. So,
yeah. And look, I want to just take a quick look at this East. And there's a 6-point gap that is now opened up between the over the red line. DC and Orlando. DC's now squeezed their way into that. It seems like there's 3 teams fighting for that 6th spot, DC, Orlando, and New England, which are at 27, 27, and 26 points right now, or 1.08 for New England, 1.17 and 1.17 points per game for DC United. So that's the battle there. And then there's a big jump up to the Impact, who are sitting on 33, a point back from Philly at 34, 2 back of the Red Bulls at 36, 4 back, of TFC now at 37, 1.54, 144, 142, 143. Log jam, right? And New York City FC is not that far ahead on the top at 152. In fact, TFC has the higher points per game right now. So it's about 2 battles, and that's how I'd look at this as an Impact. Yeah, it's a lost chance, but it's one of those teams in that mix there, and you're not off the map. You're safe in there right now. 6 points at this point in the season above the playoff line. Yes, you can lose that, but by and large, it's like a It's like a volleyball. We're watching a lot of Olympics. It's like volleyball. When you get up 4 or 5 points, it doesn't seem like a big amount, but it's a huge amount because when you think about it, it's a side out thing, right? Like all Montreal has to do is side out the rest of the way, and they'll make the playoffs, and then it's a new season.
And they have 1, if not 2 games in hand in front of everybody in front of them. So Philly, New York, Toronto, and NYCFC all have either 24 or 25 games played. Montreal has 23. So there's that possibility that if they win those games, you get that 3-6 points to the top of the table that would be available here. So there's a lot of potential still for Montreal. The fact that they were able to stick 2 wins together really helped them. If you take those points away, they would be in the DC United Orlando conversation. Now with those victories close together, they are in the Philly and New York conversation. So at least they're in the upper gap of that crazy standing.
Yeah, people that dismiss points per game, what I always say to them is you look at the points per game figure and then just multiply that by the games you have in hand, and that is a realistic amount of points you can add when comparing to that team. You know what I mean? Yes, so you can't just if you have 3 games in hand, don't add 9 points and think that that's a sure thing. You could get 9 points, but by and large, if you're averaging 1.5 a game, then take those 3 games and add 1.5 times 3. That's realistic. And if you look at Montreal in that context, they're 3 points. It's almost a dead heat. Like you add 3 points to it, they'd be at 36. They'd be a point behind Toronto right now. So there you go.
Exactly. So Montreal is still in the contention for all the marbles in the Eastern Conference, really, because it's still up for grabs for those 5 clubs. Take DC out of it. New York, Toronto, New York Red Bulls, Philly, and Montreal are in that mix for the top of the East.
Yeah. Look, I'm in Toronto, so people will accuse me of bias here. I think Toronto right now, because of their home heavy schedule, they still have 2 more home games than road games left. And they have a great record at home with 7 wins. To be that, most outside handicappers would probably put them as the slight favorite to win the East and take the rewards of that. But nonetheless, there's still a lot to play for here. And as I said before, and this goes to Toronto fans that are worried too. They're 10 points into a playoff spot, right? They're 10 games in a playoff spot with 10 games to play. The chances of them losing that are slim and none. Now, Toronto in the past has geared itself towards slim a lot when it comes to the bad end of the spectrum. But I remind you that this TFC team has nothing to do with 2013. It's a completely different management. It's completely different ownership. They have the same name ownership, but it's completely different across the board. So if you want to be fatalistic about things, by all means, knock yourself out. But the reality is there's no logical basis to that fatalistic attitude right now because there's nothing that this particular version of TFC has done to suggest that it is going to fall off a damn cliff. It needs probably 3 more wins to make a playoff spot.
But speaking of going off a cliff and speaking of not having a lot of opportunities lately, Vancouver Whitecaps on Friday night played the San Jose Earthquakes at home, and Quincy Amarikwa decided that Vancouver was going to lose that game.
Yeah, early on goal there, nice goal. Doubled the lead up, 60th minute. Vancouver never looked like they were going to do much in this one, Kevin, and they did score a goal late to make it look prettier than it probably was.
They scored in the 93rd minute in a frantic situation where they were putting everybody forward and trying to get 2 goals out of nothing in 2 minutes. So they got 1, but off like a bounce, and then somebody finished it. But it wasn't like a design goal that he needed during that game.
Yeah, and folks, this is not a blip anymore. They are -7 goal diff. That is the worst in the West. They have allowed 41 goals. That is the worst in the West. They've increased their goal scoring a little bit from last year, which was a big problem with 34 goals scored, but that's still not the top. If you're going to increase your scoring at the expense of your back line, then you at least need to be near the top, right? They're kind of just in the middle of the pack now offensively. And as I said, -7 goal differential, 41 goals allowed, by far the worst goal differential allowed. Colorado Rapids have only allowed 20 goals, so twice as many goals Vancouver's allowed than Colorado in this season. And that is a major problem, and it has to be putting everyone in that club in jeopardy. They're going the players, the coaches, the whole crew. I don't see them making. They're only 2 points out, so it's hardly would be hardly a miracle for them to come back.
Yeah, but they're 16 points out of FC Dallas. That's the difference.
Yeah, and right now, they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot, but they're 5 points out of a home playoff spot, and they're 7 points out of the second round, right? So they are a long way off right now in terms of MLS. We just talked about how 7 points or 6 points in Montreal's case was pretty safe at a playoff. The idea of Vancouver catching RSL, which that fourth place, and I think fourth place is kind of what anyone should be gearing for in this league. You want to avoid that playing game as much as you can. They're 7 points away from that. The best Vancouver can hope for is to sort of grab that road play-in spot right now and hope. And that's not a progression from last year in any way whatsoever. There's something wrong with this club. And we've expressed our theories before. I maintain that. They need a game breaker. I don't know what's wrong with the defensive side of things. Watson's taken a step back. That's as simple as I could put it, right? But there's something that's not quite there.
No, exactly. So, and right now, because you mentioned if they get that play in, because we're in August now. We're in the middle of August, so it's close to September, and we're getting close to the end of the season. There's like not even 1/3 left. So, Vancouver, their away record is 3-8-1. If they qualify in sixth place for that play-in record, for that playing game, you never know what can happen. It's on the road. It's not necessarily going to be easy, and you might be one and done. You want to do better than you did, and you want to replicate what you did as well. So you do want to qualify in one of those top 4 spots. And you mentioned 7 points away from there, and they have 2 more games played than 2 out of the 3 clubs in that position.
Yeah, clearly, in many ways, the most disappointing team. In terms of if you're talking from a neutral perspective, in many ways, maybe the most disappointing team in the entire league in terms of expectations versus
Chicago didn't have any expectations.
There's teams that absolutely that they looked at and said, well, nothing's expected here. But this particular team is there was much expected. There were a couple people in the preseason that picked them to win. So here we are. At any rate. All right, Kevin, I'm just loading up my NASL stuff to have a brief conversation there. And any final thoughts on any of the teams, Montreal, TFC? What is the mood in Montreal right now?
Well, people are a little bit worried, but you have to be on your guards because, it's another defeat on the road, 3-1. They have the feeling of being hardly done by the refs, but it's not that bad right now. It's when you get those 2 games in hand in front of the clubs in front of you, that you need to make those points. You need to win those 2 games. You need to win, continue to have those great performances at home. It was difficult earlier on this season at Stade Saputo. It seems like that situation has been rectified, but they need to continue to do this. We're in the dog days of summer. It's the second half of August. We're getting to September, and results are coming at a premium. And I do feel that Montreal needs to win consistently, exactly. And they need to string more wins. Again, I mentioned this, the 2 in a row helped, but they need to string 3, 4. Then you bridge that gap, and you're not even talking about the possibility of falling 5th or 6th, but you're battling for the top of the East.
Exactly. All right, let's turn our attention to the NASL quickly. We've given it short stick over the past Olympic time. That'll change once the games are over. We only have so many hours in the day and so many eyeballs to watch, but certainly I wanted to get it out there that Edmonton continues to do quite well. They won 1-0 over Minnesota on the weekend on the Sunday. Their famous Sunday games. Ottawa not quite as good. They went 2-1 down to Jacksonville. Kevin, the Edmonton story is going to be underreported because it simply is. We don't have TV here, and that's a problem. I don't know what the answer is other than to get it on TV, and I don't know whether when you look at MLS ratings in Canada, I don't know how you go NASL because you'd be talking about 1,000 people watching, and that's probably not going to play out. So
it's hard to justify that. It's hard to justify the cost of producing, broadcasting, and all that when it's hard to get eyeballs, and then they want to do the same for online broadcasting, but it's hard to reach the same amount of people. It takes a lot of effort to get that feed out and to get it viral, if you can say so. No, it's a very difficult situation because it's like a vicious cycle. If you want to draw people to the club, you need exposure, but you need exposure, you need to draw people. So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yes, exactly. Look, it's hard to get on the computer. I mean, this just sounds silly, but people still, as much as streaming and all that's a thing for a lot of us that are listening to this show because we're listening to a damn podcast. Most people still listen to audio journalism on the radio and TV journalism on TV, right? That's how it works still. And until such a time as the computer and TVs are interchangeable and how people watch, you're never going to get the same reach when you have an online presence. But you know what would get a reach, and what is one reason why, if anyone's listening from FC Edmonton, why you really should start thinking about maybe joining the Canadian Premier League when it starts, is that the Canadian Premier League will launch with a TV contract. And regardless of whether you feel that the level is going to be the same, obviously the ratings are going to struggle a little bit in the beginning, but the contracts can be tied into what they're doing. So to me, the answer, if you want to expose your brand to more people, is to get it on TV in a real way, and that's going to be probably more likely through a cooperative TV partnership with one of the major networks, which is what I've heard is likely in the case. Let's look at the standings of the fall season and the combined season for Edmonton. They are right now tied with Indy 11 at the top of the table for the fall season. They are 2 points up on the Cosmos. Ottawa is doing a little better in the fall. They have 9 points in 7th right now, but they're playing this string out for the most part. They're not going to be a playoff contention team this year. In the overall standings, Indy 11 is on top with 37, but FC Edmonton only a point behind on 36. And what's more important there is Indy 11's already clinched their spot, so they're in, Kevin.
That is amazing, because when you talk about games at home for the postseason at Clark Stadium, you're talking about a cold time and a very good time for Edmonton.
Yes, exactly. Ottawa, 18 points. They are in 9th in the combined standing. As I said, they're doing a little better in the fall season so far already, with already doubling their point total from the spring. Miami's also improved. That they were on the base in the back with 18 points. Jacksonville at 15. Their question there is whether they could hold off Puerto Rico, who have only played half the season and are on 7 points. Look, as I said, Rayo, they've been falling off after a great start, and we think we know some of the reasons for that. 25, the playoff teams right now are India's clinched it already, and then you would look at Edmonton would be next in line at second to clinch the second one, the Cosmos and Minnesota. That looks like your playoff mix right now. Rayo seems to be falling. Tampa Bay's never really quite got it going this year. Carolina had the great start, haven't done much since. Fort Lauderdale's not paying anyone. Well, maybe they are now. I don't know.
Yeah, the situation might be resolved. They actually started the new stadium down the road, the former cricket stadium, and they played. And I actually saw a couple highlights of that game. And yeah, they're playing on gridiron lines and all that. But you know what? The stand seemed not full, but there was people in the stand, so at least it's positive.
This is what I like about Edmonton. And when the Olympics are over, I think I'll make an effort to get somebody on here. We had a player that was supposed to join us just prior to the Olympics, and unfortunately our timing couldn't get worked out. So I'll try and get him back on. I like what it is. If you look at Indy, they've got the big attendance there, so they're driving. They have probably more revenue than most of these teams. They could spend a little more on player salaries. That's the NASL is like that, because there's no salary cap. That if you have more people in the stands, you're going to be a little better off. The Cosmos are the Cosmos. They have the backing. They're going to spend a little bit more than most teams. Minnesota is preparing for MLS and has always been a strong team at this level. Edmonton is the one that kind of jumps out at you. But when you look at Edmonton and know what Colin Miller's been doing there for years, it's just a good program. It's a good program that does a lot with a little, and I think that that's something that's really worthwhile in this particular. They are the Leicester of the NASL right now, and we'll see whether they can finish the job, and I hope they can. But so far, so good, Kevin.
Exactly.
All right. Olympics, man. I got a lot of Olympics, and I got to get to Scally's. If you are listening to this, Kevin will have this up probably about 2 hours before the game time. Scallywags here in Toronto. I'm sure most of your normal places, if you want to head to them, if you normally watch Canadian teams there, it's the middle of the afternoon on a work day, so it's going to be a little smaller crowds across the board. But certainly the one in Toronto, we're pushing hard at Scallywags, at St. Clair and Yonge. You know it. It's painted black now. It used to be yellow. It used to be this ugly yellow that would jump out to you. They painted it black, which isn't as much fun, but nonetheless, it's a famous bar here in the city. We're going to be upstairs in the patio. It's a beautiful patio. You can come have some late lunch, have a couple beers if you're on a day off or whatever. Maybe play a little ping pong when you're done. Try and emulate the table tennis at the Olympics. They got a couple of nice table tennis courts right behind us there. Lots of fun. Bubble hockey if you want to take me on in bubble hockey after the fact. So get out there. Support the Canadian women's national team as they attempt to make history today at Scallywags at 3:00, and that'll be my final word on the show, Kevin. So as always,
and until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.